Waushara Community Church presents the Mixing Bowl Podcast.
Welcome, church family, to the Mixing Bowl Podcast. Today we're continuing our conversation about the life and the ministry of our leaders. And we want to do this in a way to give you an opportunity to not only get to know them, but really understand the heart God has given to them and what they're doing. And so today we're gonna hear from Aaron, and we're gonna hear a little about his life. And if you have known Aaron longer than me, you know that Aaron can be very, very eloquent in his speech.
I don't know if that's the word people would use.
I'd use it. But he has the ability to tell a good story. And so I told him we're going to try to rein him in a little bit today, just to keep on track. But we want to hear from our ministry leaders. We want to hear their hearts. And we want to know what God is doing and using them for. And so, Aaron, you've been here for about almost 6 years. Yeah. And give us a kind of a list of your journey of where you've come, some of the ministry experiences maybe you've had that brought you to WCC.
Sure. So I went to Stevens Point, actually, for musical theater, and I went off into the world and was acting, as an actor, pretty full-time, but, it's always off and on, and just through a series of events, was kind of ready to figure out what the next chapter was, and a friend invited me to Korea, and so kind of without hesitation, I just said, yeah, why not? And at that moment in my life, I wasn't pursuing God. I wasn't engaged in the body of Christ anywhere. And so I just got on a plane and went off to Korea, put all my stuff in storage. And about 3 months into that journey, where I thought I was going to be there for a year, experience it, and get out of there, the Lord used somebody to point my friend who had convinced me to go, she and I, to go to this little church that was near our apartment buildings where all of our teachers lived. And so from that moment, there was this Australian pastor there who liked to go drink beers and read the Bible after lunch on Sundays. And he really just helped reframe Scripture correctly for me. And so it's just a path he put me on, and we had a bunch of young guys. So God was just really reframing. It was like 16 or 17 guys, randomly, all foreigners in Korea, like trying to figure out what their life was going to be. And so God just used that little Bible study after church to like really reorient a bunch of dudes' hearts towards him and correct a lot of misunderstandings we had about Scripture. And so that really was a catalyst for that and meeting my wife and us getting married at the end of that first year. So we dated for like a month. We're basically engaged, and 4 months later, we got married. And the Lord really spoke into that, was like, when you commit to this and you do these things, and I can't tell you that this is like perfectly biblical. I can just tell you that this is what I really felt the Lord speaking to me about, was like, I'm going to start this journey for you. And so we stayed at the church for another year and a half, and then through, connections, went off to help another pastor from a sister church, do some other work at a different church. It's all a little bit complicated, sure. Maybe boring for people. But through those connections and the work we did there together, we built a team. We trained up volunteers, and we handed everything off to those volunteers. And then we went and planted a church and started this music ministry that worked with K-pop stars. But mostly the most significant part of that whole journey was prayer. I mean, when the band got up to go play the music, there was one person sitting in the chairs. And so our time just was laced with a lot of prayer. And so we were on that journey for about 5 years. And then my dad passed away. And we could just start to, the Lord, we've talked about this, the Lord starts to redirect things. And then you realize, like, hey, this was a really great journey. I grew a lot, but the Lord is taking me off this path into a new a new place. And so we kind of jumped off both of those trains, and in a really short period of time, like an unnaturally short period of time, got my wife's visa. And one of the girls I was leading worship with there said, "Hey, my church is looking for somebody." And so we moved back, lived in my mom's basement. I did a couple of interviews / candidating. It's a little bit different most of the time for me than it is for you. And I really felt like the Lord was calling us out to Washington State. So we were in a place called Federal Way. At the time, it was the second largest population of Koreans in the United States. So we were like, this is really cool. And they had a Korean ministry that had basically been using their building that they eventually sold to. So it was like in the parking lot of the church. And the second week we were there, the lead pastor there announces to the congregation, "I'm stepping down." And he was a super awesome guy. It was no hard feelings. One of my favorite preachers of the word, super smart man, unfortunately just passed away from cancer, which was part of that journey of why he stepped down.
Sure.
And so we went through an interim there for that next year, and about 9 months into our year there, found out I would be losing my job just because of financial reasons. I think probably 5 or 6 staff members were let go. And so then we kind of migrated back to Kenosha, back to the Midwest, and served at a small church in Illinois for a few months, and really found ourselves wondering, "Oh God, what are you doing? Are we missing the message? Are we not supposed to be doing this?" And then I got a call from Pastor Al. It was, we joke about this all the time, like, Waushara.
Don't ask me. I still can't pronounce it.
Who are you and where are you? In central Wisconsin. So I just jumped in the car and came up here, and God really just moved a lot of hearts and a lot of things in place. So I guess that was 6 years ago, and we've been on a wild ride kind of ever since. Walked through COVID together, walked through another interim period that brought us you.
Yeah, I think I want to touch on one thing because I think it's important. Little context here. You said K-pop, so knowing our congregation, knowing the Midwestern. If you don't have any desire or I like, I've been to Taiwan. I like Asian cultures. Yeah. K-pop is if you're not probably under the age of 30, you probably don't know what it is unless you've experienced some of the culture. So what is K-pop?
Well, K-pop is short for Korean pop music. Oh my gosh,
Korean Backstreet Boys.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, yeah. For sure.
But maybe big. Some of them are bigger.
Because Korean, for sure, bigger now. But similar in the same way that like Koreans really love to stick as many members into a group as possible, and so you get to, like the Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, right? You get to experience all the different versions of guys or gals inside the group together.
Yeah.
But the funny thing it did between K-pop and Korean dramas, like outside of the U.S. until recently, everybody in the world was paying attention. And there are a couple, cult hits, like people probably heard of Psy and Gangnam Style and stuff like that. Yeah. But a lot of those, especially guys, I don't know about the ladies because I didn't meet a lot of them, are foreigners, are Canadian or American or Australian. And so they're English speaking, family is Korean, but they live more in a Western context. And, like one of the main guys we worked with, I mean, he came over, I think he was like 12 or 14 and did this audition. And then all of a sudden was training for a couple of years, and it was just a duo, and they released, and they were like the biggest Korean pop stars in Korea for years and years. But he was part of that church that the pastor I worked with was a part of, and so he loved music. The pastor loved music, and he ended up being producing music in Korea over the years that I worked with him. But yeah, I think when people probably love it or hate it, but I think
That's
it's just
fair. That's
fun.
probably fair.
It's fun. It's very animated. It's full of life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's it's a joyous thing to take in most of the time.
No, it's funny because you said it. I mean, I knew what you were talking
Yeah,
about, but it's probably one of those context situations like, wait, what's K-pop? Yeah,
It was a very unique situation too because the Lord used these mostly guys, right?
sure.
To open doors into closed door areas of Asia. And so it was an upfront thing. They're like, hey, we love you. We love working with you. You're obviously super talented. Can we use your face for the gospel? And they're so generous. Like for the people we worked with, they're like, yeah, of course. If it means that we can go sing songs about Jesus in places that won't let us sing songs about Jesus,
That's fair.
great.
Yeah. All right. So you've been here 6 years. Your ministry role has really evolved. That's the reality.
Sure.
We talked about this when we interviewed me. That's the reality of ministry.
Yeah.
Or whatever we're brought in for doesn't often stay that way for long.
Yeah.
Currently, kind of what is your ministry role? What are you focusing on here at WCC?
Well, I suppose the more obvious, right, is I help to lead the music and we say the music and tech team. My hope is that they all see themselves as one team, not two separate teams, but music and tech team that serves mostly on Sunday mornings, right? Sometimes outside of Sunday, but that I guess is sometimes just general technologist in the building.
Yeah.
Although I'm really thankful God's brought a number of other people who are a bit more savvy that have started to help with those things too. I mean, until recently, most of our communication stuff, and probably for people that means not a lot maybe, but it's everything from I've rebuilt our website like 6 times in 6 years, to the email newsletters that go out every week, or I know people hate this, but our advertisements for our church on Facebook, the marketing portions of things, to Chris and Louie, and I now that thank God for Chris and Louie, we've started to work on our database and really. It's good to know people in person, but it's also when you get this many people, right, you have to keep track of them so you can care for them well, or stay in contact. And so that's been a big part of it. And then in the last 2 years, as we had a leader step down from youth group, I would say probably more stepping into mostly the administrative portions of that. As a staff member, and then just getting to enjoy standing shoulder to shoulder with those people serving as leaders. And it's cool because we've seen that leadership grow from, 5 or 6 people, I think, that first year, maybe. And I think we have, I'm just spitballing because now I'm trying to imagine everybody's faces, probably like maybe 11 or 12 leaders.
That's great.
It's just a lot of fun. I'm thinking about it because we had rock last night. So just tons of stuff going on. I'm sure there are many other things,
It's the bottom it's the bottom of your job description and anything else the church needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fun. It's fun to think about where God takes us. Like, hey, God brings you in for this, like, the church when they go out to call people to minister, they're like, hey, we need this one specific, like, we have this specific mindset in mind for this role, and then it evolves, and that's the cool part about, if we're humble and willing, God will use us to kind of take our role beyond what it really is, which is a fun part of that. And you and I get an opportunity to talk a lot, and your role, you said music, which I think is the right term, right? And this is something, if you're listening, you gotta understand. Music is a portion of our worship.
Yeah.
And we often say the worship team, and those are not wrong terms. So I don't want people to be like, oh, we can't call them the worship team. Those aren't wrong terms. Music team just sounds weird.
Yeah.
Band is not what we have, right? We're not a
Right.
band. It's not that they're not skilled or could be a band. It's just that that's not what it is. And so it's one of those things that's hard to define. But I think for people to understand of like, even on the Sunday morning, like some of the conversations you and I have to have of like, how do we revamp this? How do we change the way, a lot of the things that happen on Sunday morning is Aaron and I having intentional conversations about how can we help lead worship. Because all of Sunday morning is designed to be discipling the church on how to worship as a body so they can take it out to do it individually.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of, Aaron and I are already talking, down the road. We've talked through Christmas, like what's going into the new year. And so that's a big part of that. That's helpful for people to go, oh yeah, I don't, they see you up front every Sunday, but I didn't know Aaron did that. I didn't know that. Whether or not now they can be like, oh, I saw that typo, I got to call Aaron. That's a different story.
Don't worry, Lois does that.
That's good. What?
No shade, Lois. I love it. Thank you.
No, I'm when people come and say, hey, Steven, you said this wrong. I'm always like, oh, thanks. I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Like that's just the reality of it. I have typos in everything I write, so it's fine.
That is the worst. You spend so much time putting something together, and then you hand it out to 40 people, and somebody's like, hey, there's like 12 typos.
Yeah. No, I get it. I read things through several times, and then I'll like copy and paste it to a different place, and it'll be like, hey, you did this. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't the last thing catch that? So
Grammarly. Gotta love Grammarly.
Yeah. So you've been here for almost 6 years. What would you say? And I wouldn't say the biggest, because I don't want... That's hard to define. What is one standout praise moment you say, hey, I've experienced God's goodness here at WCC. This is one moment that really just stands out to me.
I'm going to give a moment, but it's really representative of a lot of moments. So, you walked in as we were kind of finishing up the set last week, just running through the songs before everybody came in for service.
Yeah.
And there was somebody who was just sitting at the foot of the stage, really needing to be loved, and heard, I think. It's not somebody I know, but this moment of, without fail, right? The two other people that were serving on the team last week rushed down to be with that person. And when we had a conversation later, it's like, what are the most impactful moments for you? Is like, when I come here and I pray with you guys, right? When we get together and we just dig in, like, God's really doing something here. We're really ministering to each other through the word and through prayer. And so I really love when the music sounds good. Better than not better.
Yeah.
But I don't remember if it was you and I talking or somebody at one of the, events I was at recently. Like, what is your strength, right? There's a hard question to ask without sounding
Ooh, look how good I am.
yeah, like an idiot. But I really hope, right? I hope other people would say, it's not that Aaron leads the music the best, but that I know that he really cares for me and wants to lead me well, and that Aaron remembers me. Like when I go to pray for people, there's a long time, and I don't even know if they even remember it or think about it, but I made sure, like, we would pray for each other, and we're going around the circle. Pray for the person to the right of you. And like, I pray for every single person when I finish, because I want them to know that I remember each of their things. And so those moments when we remember each other and when we care for one another, those will always be those, to me, the most important and most impactful moments. As I've emotionally worked myself up here.
No, I think that's a good point, right? Like I was trying to think of like, what is my most standout service. Like I felt like, and I was like, it was the one that I didn't do anything. It was the act service,
Yeah.
like where I got to witness and be part of being led by the team, by the other elders, by Pastor Robert, like to just to be in the moment, to pray and to walk through that process. God was moving in the midst of that service. I did nothing. I mean, I helped, navigate it, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I did nothing, right? I didn't teach. I didn't, share. I got to be part of what God was doing, and I think those are wonderful experiences.
Yeah.
So with that, there are a lot of pressures that come with serving in ministry. There's a physical drain, there's an emotional drain, there's a spiritual drain. There's a challenge to our families, right? How do you maintain your relationship with Christ? Like, how do you keep focused on Him and what He is doing, and that might be helpful for maybe someone who's listening to say, I need some help navigating. How do I stay focused? What works for you?
I'm not going to be cliche and just I don't know if people have listened to your recording yet or not, but I would echo the things that you said, which is getting away. But ours are probably a little bit different.
Sure.
Like I just need to leave town. No shade on Watoma. But I need a new environment.
Yeah.
Because most of my environment revolves either between sitting in the booth over here, being down in the rock room now, or in my bedroom / office at home.
Sure.
And then when I get out is to go to the gym, which is an honorable mention here. Like being physically active and exercising in some way.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure everybody has specific ideas, but just doing anything, really. Those two things, I'm changing because I'm getting older now. But like I really need people. And so I would say that there are a lot of people, and we kind of talked about this in one of the other episodes when we talked about just the fears of discipleship, right?
Sure.
Is sometimes that component of people. It's very easy. I kind of grew up in my late teens, early 20s with a lot of depression. And so it just led to a lot of self-hiding or just turning inward. And so over the years here, right, I'm really thankful God provided a bunch of, like a small group of people has really been my human foundation for kind of staying grounded. But I've noticed in those moments where I'm disconnected to them, and not intentionally, not anybody's fault, like I'm heading downward. And so it takes that fight to get back into those relationships and those conversations, and those meals together,
Sure.
To keep pointed in the right direction.
That's good. Yeah, we're a body, right? We're not solo acts. We are a body. Jesus could do it by himself. We cannot. Jesus didn't even do it by himself.
Yeah.
That's the incredible part. And I'm not talking about the disciples.
Yeah.
I'm talking about he had such a close relationship with the Father that he did not go it alone. So that's helpful to hear. Hopefully that's something that we could all take away and go, okay, what is a component of this? Because as you hear from all the staff, you go, okay, hey, this is how they do it. Maybe that would be helpful. I haven't tried that before. I hope that's helpful to someone. We talked about your role. It's kind of evolved. I don't want to speak necessarily specifically to your role, because I think especially when you and I have conversations, I think this is the conversation that happens with most ministry people in the church is when we think about and dream with God about what's the future look like, God, where you're leading us. It doesn't necessarily impact our specific role.
Sure.
Like it does impact it, but it doesn't necessarily change. It might change the picture going forward for it. But what's your dream, aspirations, hope in the coming months or years? Like, what is the thing you want to see the ministry here go towards?
I think the quick answer, and for people listening this time, we've actually recorded this podcast before, and so I'm desperately trying to think of what I said before because I think it sounded better than what I'm going to say now. But I think with a focus on discipleship, which we both know means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That there will be a lot of unknown consequences. And so what that looks like in a short-sighted way for me is that maybe we turn our focus away from making our team better and turning outward to raising more people into that space.
Sure.
Which we have not welcomed, but that just not has been a structure that we've been able to put in place to create those moments. And so in that short-sighted way, we've been meeting with the youth to talk about how they can use their gifts and skills to serve the church.
Yeah.
And as we help build those, they'll not only serve the church, but they'll take that out with them. And hopefully, even unbeknownst to them, we'll start using those new skills and tools to lead other people well.
Yeah, they will help. They are part of the body, right? They'll help us grow.
They're the, if we're being honest, right? They're the only way that a youth group grows.
Oh, sure, for sure.
Just like when I think my team thought, the team thought I was crazy when I said, hey, this team only grows if you guys are in the pews, the proverbial pews. Sure. If you're in the pews knowing people and like almost searching for the people who have these gifts, because we're, for better or for worse, often really focused on accomplishing certain things on Sunday mornings. Yeah. I don't get to meet all the people that our team gets to meet.
Sure.
And I purposely don't let them serve every week because I want them to be a part of the body around them. And not get overwhelmed by their service too.
That's the downside of like I sit in the front row by myself.
Yeah,
like when I was an associate pastor, I used to sit in the back of our even if I was preaching, I'd sit in the back and people would be like, "What's he doing back there?" I was not like the far back, but there was a group of young families like we had that were always in the same section because their kids were a little noisy and we wanted to be in the midst of them. Yeah. And so we always sat back there as a family so that we could help maybe or whatever. But I here it's like, oh, I'm in the front row and I get to have conversations with people, but a lot of times, especially on a Sunday morning, and this is true for both of us, right? That we don't get to sometimes our conversations are just about the job rather than about growing in a relationship with someone personally or something like that. So
for me, probably like a third of the time, it's like, hey, this is broke. Can you come fix it? To I guess put a pin on that. If we're heading towards the end of this question, is that we would fully embrace this call to make disciples, and so whatever part of the body we are, that we would see that part of the body excelling in. Excel seems like a funny word to use, but excelling in their ability to disciple,
making God known more. That's how we excel. I think that's a good word. That's why the word doesn't sit well with your brain of like, well, I don't want to excel. Like, I want God to get the glory.
Yeah.
That's good. No, that's good. It's a good heart for us to have and go, hey, I don't really know what the future looks like, but I know this is the trajectory that God is calling us to do, and whatever falls into place as we go along that route, I'm comfortable with that. That's a good.
That is the idea of just being faithful, right? Like obedience and faithfulness don't produce the things we assume they'll produce.
Sure.
But when God focused and biblically correct, right, they always produce something good. God's always going to produce something good from that obedience and faithfulness.
Absolutely. As we're trying to wrap up here, I want to be intentional about, I feel like these are personal conversations, but I want to be intentional. Sometimes people who haven't maybe had personal conversations with us don't know us or tend to know us, and hopefully the podcast eventually helps that conversation of going, oh, I know Stephen and Aaron well enough to I know their hearts, and I can hear that coming out of them. I see Jesus coming out of them. But I want to go to a more basic thing, right? One of the things in ministries is we're always engaging in growth. And in growth can't be quantified, so it's just becoming more like Jesus. That's it, right? So in the midst of that, we read a lot of books, podcasts, whatever. What is one recommendation maybe you have for someone that's listening? They say, okay, I've been excited to hear about Aaron's journey. I'm loving the way God's leading him. I like the way he's staying focused on that. Okay, what's another way he engages? Okay, this is a book or something that Aaron would recommend. Hey, take this with you. And it might be helpful in your journey.
I don't have tons of book recommendations. I fall asleep when I read books.
That's fair.
By the time I get to a moment in my day, that's outside of reading scripture, honestly, right? Most of the time I fall asleep. But I would say, if I was going to recommend a book, I really love the Tozer books. There's like a collection of books, right? And we as a team went through the worship one together. And there's a prayer one. And like to be honest, when I do like sit down and read a physical book, I like something that moves quickly and I can kind of get through. And if you like that, those are not those. Those are not those.
Yeah, Tozer's not.
Super meaty.
Yes.
And so you have to be willing to move slow.
Yeah.
And it requires that you wrestle with the word a lot. And so those are really great books. And not like obviously that book is not oriented, like it's a collection of I believe, writings and sermons that Tozer had that they compiled. So this isn't like a worship book for music teams, right? This is a book on worship, a biblical look at, a holistic biblical look at worship. And so I think that's worth checking out.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, because sometimes, we can do it while we're doing other tasks, I listen to a lot of talking like this, right? A lot of podcasts. I think that a balance of being in the world and not of it is still having to know what's going on. And so I like podcasts that talk about culture, what's going on in culture, what does Scripture have to say about that, so that we can kind of continually draw that conversation back to a biblical worldview.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think it's helpful to always be willing to hear other people speak and get to a place where we can discern well enough through the Spirit whether or not it's helpful for us.
Yeah.
Let's end on just a fun note.
Okay.
All right. Recommendation for a hobby or something to do that's just restful for you. That might be restful for others. And I'm not talking about resting in the Lord. You can do that, obviously, but just restful for you.
Oh, man, that's pretty easy for me, although it's adjusted over the years. Given that I said at the beginning of our recording here that my background is acting, specifically musical theater, but acting in general, I watch a lot of movies, or at least I used to. I watch more TV shows because I can fall asleep and I don't care. But yeah, I mean, I really love that. My kids really love going to the movie theater. We're really blessed being in Watoma that we're not far from a cheap movie theater, and we don't get to go often, but we can just go get some snacks and that's one thing that we can, enjoy. We went and watched the animated Transformers movie, the new one, the other day, and I didn't want to go at all, to be honest. But my son really wanted to go, and we went, and we ended up. It was my son, my daughter, and I, and we had a blast. The movie was really great. You know, it was a lot of fun. It was fast paced, and we got to have some snacks, and then we had over an hour of time just to talk in the car ride there and back, and so that was really fun too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I am not. Musicals are kind of an interesting. I'm like, I mean, I have one as a kid I loved. There was one, the Newsies. I really, really loved the Newsies when I was a kid. But
that is peak millennial, I think.
Yeah, probably. That's probably the case. Yeah. But I think that's fair. Like, one of the things about hobbies is they can be God honoring. And that might be weird to say of like watching a movie is God honoring. I'm not necessarily taking that stretch, so don't read it as that. But they can be really God honoring, saying, "Hey, I'm going to be intentional about doing something for my mental and spiritual health that God has given me a like for in my life that is not a bad thing for me." Yeah. And so I think finding things that are helpful. Like, painting maybe. Like, you just sit and paint. We probably have a lot of people out there that crochet or knit, that can make wonderful things. Yeah. But it's like super restful for them. Yeah. I know we have guys that sit in the tree or the blind in the middle of the field, and it is very restful. For I don't know why, but it's very restful for them.
Well, I would love to do board games like you guys do.
Yeah.
The reality is we've bought some more advanced board games because they've gotten a little bit older, and just getting through the instructions and like getting to the actual start.
That's fair. I always watch a video first.
Yeah, it's so
someone teach it to me so that I can then read the instructions.
I think that might be the thing we need to kickstart our, because we just kind of stopped. We play card games. There's some card games we really love to play. They're not too complicated. So again, it allows us to to have conversation.
Yes.
And just enjoy being together.
Yeah. Think about it in the terms of discipleship, right? Like, we're training someone in something that we know, right? And so there's when it comes to like board games specifically, it's like I need to know the person before I pull a game out, because I will know really quickly whether or not that game will work for them, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I could pull a game off my shelf that takes 4 hours,
right?
And most people, like 98% of people, are going to be like, absolutely not. So that game doesn't come off the shelf for those people, right?
I wasn't planning on spending that much time with you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So no, that's great. I think it's good to know, right, that your ministry leaders walk normal lives, right? Our ministry is we are blessed to by God to be allowed to serve in the capacities we do and get to do this as our job. Yeah. Like, I saw someone post something of like, if you could have any dream job, I was like, I do my dream job. Yeah. Like, I don't want anyone else's job. I want to do the ministry that God gets me to do. And so I think it's fun to just hear, hey, here's what you like. Here's what you do on a regular basis. Here's what and the reality is we don't have time to really do any of those things. Sure. We just we're lucky that we get opportunities to do so. So, Aaron, I thank you for being willing to kind of answer my questions, and just giving the opportunity for our church to hear a little more about who you are and where God is leading you. So thank you for that. And we thank you for joining us this day in this podcast.
Yeah. Thanks.
Play sweet elevator music.